All right, everybody, welcome to module number 7, our conversation and quick overview of tobacco. Hope that you're doing well, and I hope that things are going okay for you in your world, and that by now you're kind of getting the hang for how our class basically works. We are moving right along, and here comes this module number 7 of tobacco, right on the heels of module 6, alcohol. And obviously, of course, these two substances are different from one another, but in a lot of ways, alcohol and tobacco are connected in some ways. And so, just like I said last week with our intro to module number 6, there really is so much that we could say in module 7 about tobacco. We could have an entire course if we wanted to, and just talk about the pharmacology and the history and the health effects and just the way in which we see tobacco creating sometimes problems for people if we wanted to. There's so much we could say. And so what we want to do in this module is I just want to give you a little quick overview in this little lecture of what you're going to see in the lecture notes as we talk about the importance of tobacco. Now, of course, tobacco is one of those things similar to alcohol that, number one, has a very, very interesting history in our culture and in our nation. And I summarize some of that for you in the lecture notes this week. And so just like alcohol has kind of an interesting, long history in our culture and in our society and in our nation, so does tobacco. You know, tobacco used to be widely advertised in magazines and on television shows. And you maybe, if you're of a certain age, you may have some memory of seeing people on talk shows or seeing people on television shows and sitcoms or dramas or in movies smoking. And you may be of a certain generation, you may remember going to a movie theater or going on an airplane or going into a restaurant where people openly smoked. And so smoking for many, many, many years was a very open, accepted kind of a practice, and tobacco had a huge sort of role in our culture and our society. And so that's always interesting about tobacco, kind of like alcohol, has an interesting history. But one of the things that we've seen in recent years, and you know this already, sort of like alcohol in a way, is tobacco has two interesting kind of facts that I highlight for you in our lecture notes that you cannot avoid. Number one, the highly addictive nature of nicotine. Nicotine is one of the many chemicals that is released into the air and into our lungs when someone smokes or inhales tobacco. Nicotine is one of many, but nicotine we've been able to, through our chemistry and through our biology, through all of our science, we've been able to identify that nicotine, this compound, is a highly addictive compound. And so as a result, we know that just like people can struggle with addiction to many other substances we're going to talk about in this class this semester, tobacco or nicotine is one of those. Tobacco has an interesting, like alcohol, pharmacology. And just like alcohol is quickly and easily absorbed into the body, when someone smokes a cigarette or a pipe or a cigar or whatever it may be, and tobacco is inhaled into the lungs, the effects affect the brain and the heart within 3 to 7 seconds. And so it is a quickly absorbed, chemical within our body, nicotine, and it reaches the brain within just a few seconds, and it provides that rush, provides that euphoria, provides that comfort that is there. But we know that nicotine is highly addictive, and that people can go from not smoking any cigarette, for example, I'll use cigarettes as an example. Someone can go from not smoking at all, and if they begin to smoke regularly, 3 or 4 cigarettes a day or a couple of cigarettes a day, they will begin craving another cigarette within 3 or 4 days. That's how quickly the body becomes adapted to and dependent upon nicotine, and how quickly tolerance and withdrawal can build up. So it is a highly addictive substance. So that's one issue with tobacco. Then the other one is all of the medical problems that we know that smoking does and can have upon a person's body. All of the research that we have that shows how unhealthy it is for us, and how all forms of cancer, especially lung cancer and emphysema and COPD and asthma, all of those problems can be made worse by or caused by consistent smoking, especially smoking from an early age on. So we have all of the health problems, sort of like alcohol, all the potential problems with alcohol as well too. There is the addictive nature of nicotine, and then there is the health problems, the many potential health problems that smoking can and does oftentimes affect. So you can't get around those two issues whenever we think about tobacco smoking. But there's also just the issue of, again, similar to alcohol, the availability, the accessibility that we have with tobacco products in our culture today. The foundation, the foundation that it has within our culture and in our society today in many, many ways, again, like alcohol, smoking in some ways is still seen kind of as a rite of passage in some ways for young adults, not like it used to, because we really have seen a decrease in the number of people who are smoking, although we've seen sort of an increase in vaping. We've seen an increase in interest in alternative cigarettes like e-cigarettes and some of those other kinds of non-traditional forms of smoking. But overall, one of the things we've seen is we have seen that many, many people have chosen not to smoke. We have fewer and fewer people smoking today than we ever have before in our sort of noted history. And so that's good news as far as people's potential health risk and being able to prevent those potential health risks as well too. So we are seeing this is one of those substances, unlike alcohol, it's one of those substances where we are seeing fewer and fewer people experimenting and using tobacco, but again, it tends to be a fairly constant presence in our society. And then the last thing I mentioned to you in your lecture notes I want to highlight for you is this. And if you watch TV very long, or some of the shows you watch, maybe even on Netflix where there are some commercials, one of the things we've seen in the last 25 years or so is this shifting attitude in our culture towards tobacco and smoking. As I said, if you're of a certain age, you may remember where there really was not very many negative attitudes at all towards people smoking cigarettes or tobacco back in the day. But today, there is what's called the non-smokers' rights movement, which is almost as equally funded as the tobacco companies now. And just this movement at all levels of government, all levels of society, where people who don't smoke are asserting their rights to not be exposed to people who do smoke. So you know that today smoking is limited in many, 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 many ways. On the college campus, the Lone Star campus, for example, people can smoke, but the places where they can smoke has been now limited to just a very, very, very few. Well, there's a reason for that. The historical reason for that is people who are not smokers, traditionally the last 10 to 25 years, have spoken up and stood up and said, hey, we recognize that smoking is not good for people and we don't want to be around it. And so if people are going to smoke, they need to go over there and smoke, right? And so governments and college campuses and businesses have begun to outlaw and prevent it from happening to where it's become harder and harder and harder for smokers. If you're a smoker, you know that. And so the reason for that is because of what's called the non-smokers' rights movement that has really gained traction in the last, several years in our culture and our society. So interesting, all of that very, very interesting when it comes to this idea of smoking and tobacco and nicotine and all of that. So just a little highlight of what we're going to look at this week. Make sure you go into your textbook and read the information on tobacco and smoking in your textbook. Look at the lecture notes, do your discussion question, do your homework assignment. We'll get ready for our next exam here in a few weeks and you'll be ready to go. See you next time.